Well, Matt Orton is with us, Chief Market Strategist at Raymond James Investment. Matt, great to have you with us here on the program. Thank you for your time. So that question, which is whether we are here in India, whether we're in the late stages of a decline or at the beginning of a sharp fall, because it looks like in the US, for no other, data has been weak, jobs data, ISM, etc. lately, but earnings season has been absolutely solid. I was looking at the latest number, 65% of what is reported in the S&P has beaten expectations. And the Magnificent Seven, the large US tech companies, the beat there, earnings there have grown 22% year on year. So those seven have outperformed the rest of the 493 by a huge degree at that scale and size. What's your sense, Matt?
Hey, good morning, Prashant. I'll start with the second part of your question first about the U.S. and earnings season. And there's this bifurcation, once again, between economic data and what's happening in the stock market. And I think what we lose track of is that the market itself doesn't necessarily reflect what's happening in the real economy. But the other point I tried to remind investors is that while the data has deteriorated, number one, it is not pointing to a recession. So I think we need to take that off the table, that while the data is weakening, it's not pointing to a recession, it's pointing to a slowdown. But again, the data has also been very volatile, and we haven't seen a significant tick up in unemployment. And when you look at earnings, not only have earnings in the US been incredibly strong, especially for companies up and down the value chain connected to the artificial intelligence trade, you've also seen aerospace and defense trade incredibly well. You've seen certain parts of the consumer continue to trade well. The credit card processors saying the consumer remains in good shape and they maintain their guidance. So that gives me the ability, at least for now, to look through some of the weakness and believe that I think things are going to be all right. But you have to pay very, very close attention to whether any of this volatility and the negative numbers turns more into a trend. You come over to India. Earnings season has not been as bright as earnings season in the US. You haven't seen significant earnings increases, but I think India is closer to the bottom of this earnings trough it's been working through. And India is also not as connected to US tariffs. In fact, if you remember back to April, India was actually kind of a ballast in many ways to the challenges that the US and other more trade-heavy countries had in connection to how the US market was trading. So I think we've forgotten about that. And I think given the incredibly strong GDP growth that India has been experiencing and will continue to experience going forward, I think that should give investors confidence that we're probably towards the tail end of a sell-off. And if you do see any sort of deeper correction, it's likely going to be very temporary and a very good buying opportunity for long-term investors.
All right, Matt, you've always been keeping the faith, always taking a positive view on India most of the times. And that's interesting perspective to look at, that maybe we're at the fag end of this whole disappointing season. So tell us, anything that stood out for you in the season, your usual favorites like stocks like ICICI Bank, I think Interglobe, we've spoken about them. Anything new coming to mind when you're looking at companies and stocks here in India?
So India's always been interesting to me also for the payment infrastructure that exists. So names that I really dove into when I was over in India back in June included Jio Financial, which is a name that's really been finding ways to integrate artificial intelligence into the way it extends loans and also enters into partnerships with different clients. That's a name that has reported very encouraging numbers and I think has some tailwinds as the flywheel effect between all of its businesses starts to go in place. And this is one that has held up in spite of the Indian market coming down. And another name that has done quite well is Paytm. That's a name where a lot of analysts have been very negative about its ability because it's an expensive stock, but it's been expensive for a reason because of its integration into the payment system and the ability of management to clean up expenses and also start to increase margins. And as I'm looking at opportunities in India, one of the key things, and I'll include the US and really anywhere in the world in this, is how are margins holding up? It's not just how much is the top line growing, how much is the bottom line growing, but are companies able to defend their margins? And in these cases, these companies are, as are some of my perennial favorites that we've talked about before.
Okay, all right, Matt, quick question. If you're putting in fresh money today, market-wise, India normally, I think, it has close on 10% weight in your portfolio. Would there be incremental allocation to Indian markets post the recent underperformance?
Yeah, Nigel, that's a great question. And I would say right now, given all of the uncertainty, I haven't been actively adding too much risk into my portfolio. Like I said, I think we're towards the tail end of a correction. The technicals don't look wonderful. So I'm not at the point where I want to put more fresh capital to work. And that's anywhere across my portfolio. But if we do start to see a washout, some of the names that I'm going to be adding to, I've been actively looking at aerospace and defense names. This has been a global theme. I've had a lot of success in European aerospace and defense and some smaller cap US companies tied to helicopters, aerospace. You look at a Hindustan Aeronautics, also tied more to the helicopter segment of the market where the Indian government actively needs to build more helicopters. They don't have enough to get to the minimum numbers they've established. I think that's the name that looks very, very interesting. It's also had a bit of a sell-off lately, and so I think that's one where I'd be looking to add money should we see a little bit more pain in the market.
Oh, interesting. So HAL, Hindustan Aeronautics, is a new name that's cropped up on your radar. We'll remember that one, Matt. Always a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining in, and you have a great week. And we'll, of course, connect again soon.